10,000, not 9,999 or 10,001.
Get them all.
Meaning.
Count every single Maniac.
And it was a movie, right? They were named after?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay, gotcha, yeah.
So, 10,000 Maniacs in My Tribe. In the opening montage, you heard a clip from Hey Jack Kerouac, and now you're going to hear In My Tribe was recorded from March to April of 1987, released on July 27th, 1987, and it is 10,000 Maniacs' third studio album. So I have a quick, but there's not a long bio with these guys this week because I didn't find a whole lot. But the nuts and bolts of it is that they were formed as a band called Still Life in 1981 in Jamestown, New York. Oh, wait, I forgot to do the numbers. Hang on a second. I got to catch myself there. And so this album ranks number 441 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 47 in 1987, number 2,880 of all time. It is 10,000 Maniacs' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did not make Rolling Stone's list, and they are ranked number 1,426 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. So, again, they were formed as a band called Still Life in 1981 in Jamestown, New York by Dennis Drew on keyboards, Steven Gustafson on bass, Chet Cardinal on drums, Robert Buck on guitar, and Buck's ex-wife, Terry Newhouse, on vocals. She didn't last long, so in the band. It's kind of weird having your ex-wife join you.
It's a shame they couldn't find somebody solid to front the band.
Yeah, it was too bad. But actually, while Terry Newhouse was still in the band, they did start inviting Natalie Merchant to contribute on vocals, as well as a guitarist named John Lombardo. And so Newhouse and Cardinal did not last long in the band, and in July they left in July of 1981, and Natalie Merchant became the new lead singer. They had a variety of drummers that came and left at this time, and they changed their name to Burn Victims first, and then to 10,000 Maniacs, which, yes, John, was named after a film. Do you know the name of that film?
Is it 10,000 Maniacs?
It is not 10,000 Maniacs.
It was like a campy sci-fi film, wasn't it?
A horror, 1964 horror film.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Josh
something
if he's
from
seen it,
space or something. Wasn't it like 10,000 Maniacs from space or something?
No,
yeah,
just 2,000 Maniacs. So they felt that they needed to add 8,000 more.
Okay.
So Josh, nothing? You never saw that one?
I have not seen that.
Okay.
No. It's 2,000 Maniacs exclamation point.
Oh, is it? I missed that. I missed that. Their first performance under this new name was on September 7th, 1981, and they played mostly covers around this time, but they did start branching out, writing their own songs with Natalie Merchant writing the majority of the lyrics and Lombardo writing the music. They released their first EP called Human Conflict No. 5 in 1982. And they lived in Atlanta for a period of time. I'm not exactly sure why they went down there. They went to Atlanta, and they had trouble
because of the music scene we talked about, right?
But
like,
they had
a lot of big.
Yeah, but I just put why that one in particular. They could have gone. I mean, they could have gone to New York, you know. But there's they went to Atlanta. But anyway,
what I'm saying is the type of bands that were there that we've covered.
Oh, I see.
Pylon, REM, B-52s, you know.
So they would have been gravitating towards that scene.
Maybe, they were Athens, that area, but yeah.
Yep. Well, they didn't really find any gigs, and they had to do things like sell their plasma and rake leaves and do landscaping to make some money. So that didn't last too long. They
Just like me in college. It sounds like my college experience. Yeah.
So they moved back to Jamestown. In early 1983, they did get a drummer to join as a permanent member by the name of Jerry Augustiniak. And he had previously played in a band called The Stains. And between March and July of 1983, they recorded their debut album, Secrets of the I Ching, which was well received by critics. And their song My Mother the War was a minor hit in the United Kingdom. And they toured extensively behind...
I was going to say, I believe that's pronounced I Ching, if we're talking about the Chinese.
Oh, thank you, Josh. I just learned something. Secrets of the I Ching.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they toured for a period of time. They got a new manager named Peter Leak, and he helped them sign to a deal with Elektra Records in 1984. And their second album, Wishing Chair, was recorded in the spring of '85. It did not sell very well, but it did get them some recognition. Again, fairly regarded, well regarded with the critics. But around this time, Lombardo left the band in July of 1986 due to frustrations with their lack of commercial success. And they went into the studio then to record this album, In My Tribe, with Peter Asher as the producer. He also produced acts such as James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt, two artists that we have covered here before. And this record saw Natalie Merchant kind of taking the helm with the lead writing role, with other members contributing here and there. Robert Buck was probably the second most had the second most contributions to the music in this album.
Is he related to Peter Buck? Did you say that?
I did not say that, and I don't know.
They are not related.
Okay.
They are not related.
Yeah, I didn't. They didn't mention anything about it. So
Got it.
This album originally had a cover of Cat Stevens' "Peace Train," which was probably not on the ones that you guys listened to or I did. And it was actually I think it was their lead single off of this record. But they later removed it in future pressings, I think like in the late 80s, maybe like around 88, 89, due to Yusuf Islam's comments that were perceived to be a support of fatwa on Salman Rushdie, which always makes me think of Larry David. Yeah, Curb. So
they also famously hated that, and it was like we wedged on the album to make it more commercial.
Right.
They didn't like the song, you mean?
They did not really want to cover it, and like kind of hated the idea that it was their lead single. So they actually play it on Letterman the first time they're on. It's one of the two songs they play. But they are very clearly more into playing "Don't Talk" than "Peace Train."
Well, and that kind of because he basically, I did read the quote. He was basically asked point blank if he thought that Salman Rushdie should be killed, and he said yes. Jesus, it was pretty like he later walked it back. Like it's like one of the main things that Cat Stevens or Yusuf Islam has been asked about in future years and stuff, and he said something about, oh, my words were twisted or taken out of context, and I don't know, from what I read, it was pretty clear what he was saying. So anyway, so that's about it. All I have on this particular record. I'll just do a quick synopsis of what happens after this, and then we can go into the takes. They did release 2 more albums with Natalie Merchant, which included 1989's Blind Man Zoo and 1992's Our Time in Eden, and they also performed for MTV's Unplugged, and they released a CD for that. But Merchant decided she wanted to leave, and she announced leaving the band on August 5th, 1993, stating that she, quote, didn't want art by committee anymore, unquote. So she then went on to a successful solo career. I found this to be interesting. So I guess Elektra dropped 10,000 Maniacs after Merchant left, and they signed her. So
slap in the face.
Slap in the face. But at this time, Lombardo and his musical partner, Mary Ramsey, were asked to join the band, so they did join back in. At least Lombardo joined back in, and they were able to keep the name 10,000 Maniacs. And so they continued to record and tour with various incarnations of the band. Lombardo and Ramsey's have kind of come and gone a couple of times. Dennis Drew, Steve Gustafson, and Jerry Augustiniak were continuous members, and they also added guitarist Jeff Erickson in 2001. Rob Buck unfortunately passed away on December 19th, 2000, due to liver failure. I think he was in his early 40s. So
I think he was 42, if I remember.
Yeah.
I remember he died really young.
Yeah, liver failure, so he was drinking a lot. Yep. Natalie Merchant has released 8 studio albums and is actually releasing her 9th on April 14th of this year, so you can check that out. And since Natalie Merchant left the band in 1992, 10,000 Maniacs have released 4 studio albums. The most recent one was in 2015 called Twice Told Tales. So there's a little bit of the bio on 10,000 Maniacs. And John, let's start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty famously a stan for 10,000 Maniacs. I've brought them up multiple times with you guys. There's a lot of pieces of 10,000 Maniacs that I really like. I love I think Robert Buck's guitar tone and jangle is super appealing to me. I have always loved Natalie Merchant as a singer and sort of a presence, like just sort of as a pop star / entity. I think she's like almost like a conscience in music to some degree. She also, I feel, represents something you don't see often in music, in that she has a decidedly feminine energy, but it's like a maternal feminine energy as opposed to like a sexualized feminine energy or a young feminine, you know what I'm saying? And it like it very much comes from an area of authority for me. And I just always appreciated it. They also are able to do something which I'm pretty famously not a huge fan of, like earnestness in general. And I know that music critics, especially like when the 90s hit and the 2000s, it kind of became real trendy to like pick on the 10,000 Maniacs for being like very earnest and preachy and stuff. But I thought Natalie Merchant wrote very direct songs. And to me, there's a very big difference between like direct and sappy or overly earnest. Like I never doubted that Natalie Merchant meant everything she said. And like, I always felt she wrote from like a deep reservoir of empathy, but didn't feel the need to have to get creative about it. Like she was more likely to create like exact character sketches and tell you exactly what was happening. There was a lot of like first person comments in her songs where she had characters speaking, and you see that on this album quite a bit. I also thought she took really interesting angles on albums, and once again, I'll give references on this album. But because of that, I always feel like 10,000 Maniacs are kind of a victim of what rock music, like, and especially rock music criticism in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s were, which is sort of like a bunch of men got to tell you what was rock, right? And like, if you were a woman, right, and you came from a feminine thing that wasn't like the sex pot or the cool chick, or like, you know what I mean, you kind of got marginalized, right? Like you know, you became Natalie Merchant, or you became Tori Amos, right? Or like stuff, and you were sort of like called lightweight, right? Because most of your audience was either feminine or like guys, you know, that didn't need their females to be understandable archetypes, right? And like, when you read, I mean, there's a really famous Spin magazine article that if you were to read it, guys, it's like appallingly sexist, like about 10,000 Maniacs. They spend the first thing talking about like how Natalie Merchant's kind of hot, but like not really for the author's taste, kind of. And, you know, she's sort of elusive, and in a way, like, basically he's just sort of like in long form telling you like, I wish she was more, you know, somebody that I wanted to like fuck, basically. And it's just like, and I just feel like that was kind of Natalie Merchant like set out to make music, but like she didn't set out to be a pop star in the traditional sense, right? And she famously kind of operated on her own terms, which makes her kind of similar to some other folks we've done, but makes her also very different than people like Madonna and stuff, who famously, like, they were independent, right? But like they were independent in a lane that was more recognizable. So there's a little bit of background about how I feel about the band. I love the singles on this album. I think it starts incredibly well, because I think What's the Matter Here is a great song. That's about child abuse, as most 10,000. I mean, Natalie Merchant famously does not really write songs about romantic love. She's kind of like Paul Westerberg that way, and that they both kind of like famously hate songs about romantic love, and often say, I'll write a love song, but it'll be about other types of love, right? Or about general states. And that's kind of her deal, you know? Like, and What's the Matter Here is about child abuse. I always am amazed at the end of that song where she just belts out that thing that seems like it's like 30 seconds long of her just escalating, you know, that like, oh, this cold and lone, and she keeps going higher and higher with more urgency. I always like love that part. Hey Jack Kerouac's interesting. It's basically about like what douchebags like all the Beats were, and it comes from the standpoint of like her mother, like the mother of Jack Kerouac, and feeling empathy for like what, you know, it must have been like to do it. Like the Weather is about depression, famously, but it's this very upbeat song that is about depression, which was by design, you know, it's kind of there. Don't Talk is, I think, a fantastic song that's like, for anybody who's known an alcoholic, it like outlines what it's like to like basically have to communicate with and deal with an alcoholic. I remember they used to get criticized for it because they said it wasn't empathetic enough to like alcoholics. And I always thought it was. It's like, I'm here day to day, but it's also exhausting to deal with the fact that, you know, you're a lot. So it's, I just, those are four songs that jump out at me. Verity Cries, the song I really like, but there's a lane about both this band sonically. They're folky enough that it gives it a twist, but not so much that they lose me or delve into sort of like being niched. They sound enough like REM and college radio that they fit like really comfortably in like 80s college rock, but they're not kind of all the way in the way that the true indie rock bands are, because they don't really have edge. But without the edge, it doesn't hurt them, in my opinion, either. So I can talk more about it, but yeah, I enjoy this album quite a bit. I'm a fan of this one, Blind Man's Zoo, and Our Time in Eden, the big, you know, the three that they end with. They also have an incredible Unplugged. I mean, to the point where people for a long time didn't even realize Because the Night was a Springsteen or Patti Smith song, because like sort of Natalie Merchant like owned that song on the stage. So if you've never seen that, check that out. But yeah, thumbs up for me, this one for sure.
Yeah, I'd never listened to any 10,000 Maniacs before. I think I only knew basically them in reference to when Natalie Merchant was solo. I think I mentioned that last week or something. But so I never went back and listened to them or kind of knew where they were in the ether. But and it's interesting what you said, John, about kind of her view on things and songwriting and stuff, because she does kind of harken back to like the Joni Mitchells and more of a lot of those singer-songwriters of the 70s.
Joan Baez is another, you know, that that lane.
In terms of the earnestness and just in terms of kind of what messages she's trying to get out there, and that's the big plus for me listening to this album is her voice. I really like her voice, and it's got a power to it, but it's also very not comforting, but I don't know. It's you know, pleasing to listen to, I guess, ultimately. And the whole album, despite John giving some good descriptions on some of the songs, kind of has this laid back feel to it that I really like about it. I think it combines that folkiness and the jangle guitar with kind of, I guess, where this type of music was at in the 80s. It's kind of interesting that this album is from 87, because I don't know, it could be much late. I think it's kind of timeless in some ways. I think it could be before this and it could be after this, and it still sounds good and not you know, of the 80s. I really like the guitar on this album. That's kind of the other strong point for me. There's I think Like the Weather is my favorite song. I like the upbeat nature of that, despite the topic and kind of the upstring guitar thing. That song really reminds me of another song, and I could not figure out what it was. It must just be something with the way the guitar sounds or the way she sings the chorus. It just kept coming back to that when I listened to it. And then there's a nice variety on this album as well. There's some country guitar on like Gun Shy, and My Sister Rose has like almost like a calypso feel to it to a certain extent. And then they incorporate, you know, the mandolin and City of Angels, which I liked a lot, and Verity Cries too, which is kind of this big, you know, statement finale with strings and a piano, and her like Natalie Merchant going like full throttle with the singing. And yeah, it was a pleasant surprise to me, because I sometimes when I see the you know, the rating where they are in best ever albums, you know, that can be a false indicator of like how good the album is. But I quite enjoyed this album a lot, and I appreciate what they're going for. And we really haven't listened to a lot of music like this, especially with a female lead singer in this decade. I mean, I could go back and fact check that looking at our albums, but I feel like we haven't kind of, you know, we've got the REM and kind of the college radio stuff, but not with a lot of female leads.
Yeah, there were not a lot of female-fronted bands in the
Yeah.
80s. Yeah.
So yeah, and like you said, we've covered Madonna and kind of the big pop stuff, and there's a lot of like, you know, teen singers like Tiffany and Debbie Gibson and stuff like that, but we're not really covering them. But yeah, this is kind of a unique outlier, I guess, in our journey. So yeah, thumbs up for me. I quite enjoyed this album.
Yeah, I actually only knew them really through the. I actually had the Unplugged album, so and a number of the songs from this record are on that, and I always liked that one.
I'll have to watch
yeah,
that. I haven't seen it. Just to bring that up.
I don't know if yeah, the Unplugged, it was kind of because they had the actual the show, and then they would have the CD or the album to go along with it, and I was always way more familiar with it. I remember seeing like video clips, but not the entire performance.
Yeah.
But that was great, and I really like this record too. Yeah, this is definitely up my alley. It doesn't sound like an 80s, 10,000 Maniacs to me is more of a 90s band, just because that's when I was introduced to them, and it was very much this music, the sound and tone of this music is very much, it blends right in with that 90s alternative rock, acoustic, folk rock sound. And I think what really stood out to me on this record was her voice. The more I listened to it, the more I really thought, man, she's got just this great, very soothing, powerful voice, and she's got kind of, it's like I know we've talked about this before. I don't know how low it is. I don't know if it's a contralto or alto or what. It's definitely not soprano. She's definitely not a higher end singer, but it's so smooth. And it fits in so well with this music. And it's a very distinctive sound. It's a very unique sounding voice that's not like an overpoweringly, distinctive voice like a Dylan or a Billy Corgan or Tom Waits. It's just a little bit. There's this little kind of like a twang or something to it that kind of makes.
She's a contralto, Matt.
Contralto.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yep.
So but as soon as it's one of those things. As soon as you hear her, this is Natalie Merchant, right? But it's also. It's also very standard as well, standard voice. But there's a great mix of stuff on here, even though it's a lot of it's kind of in the same lane, but it's that jangled guitar is just, permeated throughout the record. And it's just one great song after another. And I really like songs on here that I didn't know before. Cherry Tree was great. Oh, actually, the other thing I'll say is I actually did pay attention to the lyrics on this. I made the attempt to do that after the Midnight Oil episode. I also had 2 weeks to kind of like, all right, now I'll go back and I'll listen to the lyrics, it's not, or pull them up. But I thought Cherry Tree was interesting because that's about what, illiteracy. Like she's like,
yes.
I'm like, well, that's
childhood
how often,
illiteracy. Yep.
Yeah, how often do you hear a song about illiteracy? It's
Not
got
very
its
often.
own. No, well, even if I heard it, I probably wouldn't know it. So I'm kind of illiterate myself, I guess you could say. But but I really, I think the first half was probably stronger, but the second half still had some really good deep cuts. You got Michael Stipe singing as a campfire song, which actually I believe they dated for a period of time.
No, it was rumored, but obviously Michael Stipe.
Natalie Merchant, I thought she said that. I thought I read that she admitted that they did have a fling going on. But anyway, he's on. Yeah, I might have to fact check that, but I thought that's what I read on her Wikipedia page. But allegedly,
so
she allegedly said that. Yeah. But Don't Talk, I really like that. There's some good guitar solos on here, and I do like that. It's a very upbeat, sound to this record, very poppy, and definitely taking their cues from that jangled guitar stuff from the Byrds and REM, and it's right up my alley. But I also liked Verity Cries was great. That's a really nice ending to the song or to the album. Just her. I think it's just her on a piano, and yeah, just solid, just really, really strong record, top to bottom. Not a bad song on here. Maybe it's not as highly regarded or ranked because it's not groundbreaking or doing anything new. It's just doing stuff really well. And I think that there is a timeless nature to this as well, even though there's a little bit of I don't know if this is like a 90s sounding album just because that's my own personal association with it, or if it's just, or or if it really is kind of more of a timeless type of thing where it could really, you could come out with something like this now and it would sound just as good. So yeah, thumbs up. It was nice going through this and hearing some a number of songs that I wasn't that familiar with before. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Well, something I just learned is I just thought Michael Stipe was always gay, but apparently he is bisexual. So how about that? I had no idea. And yes, he did apparently date. I know it was rumored, but I'll be honest, I thought it was sort of like cover, right? You know what I mean? Where you would have, and no, apparently for a while he primarily dated women and then sort of moved to primarily dating men. So I only say that because I know that he was one of the first artists I remember, coming out and not hiding his sexuality. So
there you go, John. Even you can learn something on the podcast.
Hey, that's what I was saying. That's my contribution to what I learned.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I'm glad you guys I wasn't sure how you were going to find. I mean, I pretty famously have said that I like this band, and I have felt that they're always underneath. And I've always said there's something about Natalie Merchant's voice, which is almost like medicinal for me, and that it just creates a comforting vibe for me. And it sounds like it hits you guys sort of the same way. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is no edge, right? Maybe they're not a cool band or something like that, I couldn't.
But it isn't boring. Like usually when you say no edge, right? It's code for boring or generic. And but like Natalie Merchant's voice is not generic because there aren't like other people floating around that sound like Natalie Merchant in popular music. There just really aren't.
Well, it's also, I mean, the production's very crisp. It's a very clean sound. It's very, it's not like electric guitar, interesting effects. It's just a really good. It's a well-produced acoustic guitar sound basically throughout. So, but
I mean, it comes from the tradition of folk. Folk music mixed with a little bit of what indie rock was in the 80s, right? Like the streamlined, and even like the jangle pop lane, that goes back to, we were talking about the Birds and stuff. There's elements of that. So, how far away is Jamestown, New York, Matt, from where you grew up?
It's out in Buffalo,
I mean, they famously talk quite a bit about how shitty Jamestown is. I think.
No, it's far away.
Yeah, it's in the southwest corner of New York.
That's probably like a 5 or 6 hour. Yeah, it's probably like a 5 or 6 hour drive from where I grew up. So
yeah, I mean, they famously say Jamestown inspired a lot of their songs. So this, you've got those, and the next album produces things like "Eat for Two" about teenage pregnancy and "Poison in the Well" about like stuff. Great songs, but what I'm saying, I'm laughing, and they're like highly influenced by Jamestown. So I'm like, boy, talk about it's like. They're from where I'm from, and they write a lot about. It's kind of like how I feel about Springsteen sometimes. Like he's from where I'm from, and a lot of his songs are about how the hell all of us want to get out, and when they don't, it's a hellscape. So yeah.
Do they continue the this kind of sound through those next two albums?
Yeah, and actually, I did see them in a small club in college in Connecticut, and they had that wasn't Natalie Merchant. It was the other. Oh shoot!
I'm trying.
Name.
Josh. Mary Ramsey,
and she filled the role very well. Her voice, definitely is able to carry what Natalie Merchant's voice did in the record. So,
but it's important to note that like when you're seeing them, it's tough, man. Because I saw them in like 2016. It's tough to be 10,000 Maniacs without both Robert Buck and Natalie Merchant. That's like. That's a pretty significant 1-2 of who's not in the band anymore. It hasn't been since like 2001, right? 2001. Yeah. But Josh, I think that if you want to know where the sound goes, two songs that you might know might be "These Are Days." Do you know that song?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit of what the 92 album sounds like. "Trouble Me" is another song you might be familiar with. Maybe not by name, but if you heard it, you'd know it. "Candy Everybody Wants" is another song that you might have heard on the radio before. Yeah, so those are three. I mentioned a couple, "Eat for Two" and "Poison in the Well" that I like a whole lot as well. So
they did cover, after Natalie Merchant left with Mary Ramsey, they did a cover of Roxy Music's "More Than This." Josh, that's actually I remember. So when we did the Roxy Music album, I was like, I do know this song, but it was from the 10,000 Maniacs version. So that was a single. That was, may have been their biggest single after post Natalie Merchant. That might have been their biggest hit.
Have you ever heard the song that Natalie Merchant did with Billy Bragg and Wilco, Matt?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good song, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, that one I always remember. Yep.
I have not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, more for me to check out
There you
later
go.
on.